Hello and welcome to my Esoteric Explorer channel. I've been extremely excited for this interview for a few weeks now, so I'm not going to delay it at all. We're going to jump straight in. So, have you noticed how British history seems to begin with the Romans? Have you ever wondered if that was true or not? Did you know that modern academia regards Brutus, the so-called founder of Britain, as a mythical character, and yet it accepts Brennus, Brutus's brother, as a real historical character? So who was Brutus and why was Britain previously called Albion? It was the Roman poet and philosopher Cicero who said, "To know nothing of what happened before you were born is to remain forever a child." Now, if we take a look at the current state of things in Britain, we are being constantly treated like children by authority. So why do authority figures seemingly want the British people to remain forever children? Graham Hancock once famously said that human beings are a species with amnesia. Well, us Brits are certainly a nation with amnesia. Or perhaps we were. So I recently came across this book, The Great Migrations, written by today's guest, Marchell Abrahams. And it's based on original research as well as building on the works of Wilson, Blackett and Gilbert. This book has retrieved and handed back to the British people its true history. We are no longer a nation with amnesia. So, without further ado, I'll bring on today's guest, author and archaeographer, Marchell Abrahams. Hello, Marchell.
Hello. Gosh, what a write-up.
I'll do my best. So, thank you so much for joining me today. I read this a few weeks ago and couldn't put it down. It was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
So much history that we thought we'd lost, and you've handed it back to us in this wonderful book. So I'm very, very grateful to you. So where did you get started on this journey, Marchell? How did it all start for you?
I think when I was at school, really, and I realized that we were not being told anything like the true story. It seemed as though we were treated to little snippets of history about battles here, famous soldiers there, which is fair enough. I'm the daughter of a soldier. But our own British history was never dealt with. We knew about Boadicea, as we called her in those days, because the proper name hadn't been discovered. But I think it was when I found the Holy Kingdom by Adrian Gilbert, Wilson, Blackett, and Gilbert, and that was the door opening for me, and I started to do my own researches.
Okay.
And at that point, Wilson and Blackett's books were fairly readily available, but very soon after that, they became not available, even through my local library. And so I started looking on the internet, and they were changing hands for £800, £2,000, and that was way out of my league. And then I did a little research on Brutus, and I bought a copy of some of the British historians, Nennius, Gildas, Geoffrey of Monmouth, the usual ones. And I began to assemble what you might call the facts, such as dates. You always got to start with dates. You need a chronology to hang your story on. And then I started looking for Wilson and Blackett books again, and I found that they were being republished at a much more sensible price. So I wrote off to this little publishing company in Wales called Cymryglyphics, and I got back the 2 books I'd ordered with a charming handwritten letter from Ross Broadstock, no longer with us, alas. And that began a friendship. And he said, well, you must come to Wales because I'd love to do some work with you. So off we went to Wales, and we got stuck in the illegal lockdown. So we went for 6 weeks, and we were there for 8 months in the end.
Oh, wow.
Marvelous, because we did lots of interviews, and I showed him the work I'd done on Brutus, and he said, you have to turn this into a book. Oh, and by the way, could you include Albine as well? So I picked up the challenge, and the Great Migrations is the result. And the more I dug, the more I found, the more intrigued I became, and the more determined I became to restore this terribly tattered old coat, which was our British history, you know, as a sleeve here, a lining there that didn't look as though it belonged, yet did. The key was when I found Holinshead's King's List, which goes all the way back to Noah. And they're all, even Albine is in roughly the right place. And so there was my chronology. So with that and Nennius, who actually mentions Brutus in his previous life as a Roman consul, I was able to stitch this tattered old garment back together again and present it, and here we are.
It's wonderful. So well done. So pleased you did. So why has there been such a concerted effort to obscure our history? What's going on?
That's a good question, that. If you look back, all the way back to Troy, there have been two forces at work. What you might, even in the Bible, there are two forces at work. There's the Babylonian forces and the Jehovah forces, if you like. You've got the multiplicity of gods against the one God. And I can't really pin this down because it's a vast subject, but it's almost like the on-off, positive, negative, striving, jockeying for position, and the one obliterating the other, and then the other comes back to life and obliterates the first one. And instead of working together and making energy, they've been put head to head to obliterate each other.
Right.
For example, you think of the Achaeans and the Trojans. You think of the Romans trying to subjugate us in these islands. And it's going on to this day. The EU, I'm convinced, are the Achaeans in disguise, and they're still trying to quell us, because for some reason there's a force abroad that doesn't like the idea of individual sovereignty.
I think that's quite obvious now.
Yeah, I mean, I that isn't terribly clearly put, but then it's still a subject I'm exploring. So if that helps, I hope that helps a bit.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Okay, so shall we start with this character called Albine?
Yes.
Yes. So tell us about Albine. Who was she, and how did she end up migrating to Britain?
Well, the only mention of her in all the British histories that deals with her in a dignified fashion is the mention in the Brute. Let's see if I can find a. Here we are. That's the Brute, or the Chronicles of England.
And how would you go about getting a copy of that?
Oh, it's from, like all my thing is, it's a facsimile from Gyan Books in New Delhi. That's GYAN books.com in New Delhi. And you get marvelous facsimiles, which you can scribble in. But you also get the privilege of seeing the original text. Word of warning, it is in Middle English.
Oh,
so it's not the easiest of reads.
No.
She's in here. She's also mentioned by all the sort of accepted later British historians like Holinshead and Camden, but they do rather laugh at the legend of it. So rather like Brutus, with Brutus, I just got to work and began to dig and to see what possible truth there could be. And I found the most amazing connection between Sumer and Britain, because for a Sumerian princess to bring her migrating people up to these islands, there has to have been a connection. It's too far away for her just to go there on a whim. She has to have been heading here for some reason. And I wanted to know what that reason was. I wanted to know what the connection was, if any. So I found the connection quite by chance. I was reading, there's a wonderful thing about Delphi in Plutarch's Moralia, volume 5. And in it, he describes going to Delphi, and at Delphi, I think this is the 1st century AD, there was, and I'd better just tell you about the founding myth of Delphi, because it's actually quite important. Zeus is said to have let loose 2 eagles, one from one uttermost end of the earth and the other from the other uttermost end of the earth. And where they met in the middle, he founded Delphi.
Okay.
So we have this sort of the north to middle, south to middle premise to begin with. So I bore that in mind, and then we come to Plutarch, who describes a character called Demetrius the grammarian, who I haven't been able to find anywhere else except in Moralia. But Demetrius the grammarian was coming home to Delphi from Britain, which was one uttermost end of the earth. And this is actually in Plutarch's work.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, that's absolutely staggering, because here we have little Britain, tiny island, who everybody thinks is either above herself or punching above her weight, or not terribly interesting, or needing to be crushed out of existence. You know, there seem to be no two measures about these islands. There was Britain with Demetrius the grammarian described as coming home from Britain as uttermost end of the earth to Delphi. So I thought, right, if Britain is let us say, the north end of the world, the known world, and Delphi is the middle, if I carry on that run line, what do I find 2,000 miles in the opposite direction? Guess where it landed? Sumeria. So that's the connection.
Wow. And just so listeners understand, we're going back 3,500 years ago.
3,500 years, yes.
Yeah, so quite a long time ago. Now, I believe around about at the same time, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a similar migration
yes.
to Britain, and
yes.
that was, of course, Queen Scota, wasn't it? So was there any...
Oh, no, Scota was much later. She was, Scota was the same. Well, we have to look at, I'm so sorry to interrupt, beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, please. No, if I got it wrong,
it's only right. That we need to accept the work that Wilson and Blackett have done on the appallingly tangled chronologies of the Egyptian dynasties.
Right, okay.
Because what you get, if I can give a small description, for example, if you take the name of London, we call it London, the French call it Londres, the Italians call it Londra, and then there are other peoples who have other different names. So that's 3 names for one city to start with. What we get, what Wilson and Blackett found with the Egyptian and indeed other dynasties, as of the Roman emperors, which we can come to that in a bit, they found that the dynasties had been laid out by different peoples using their own names for the same genealogical descent of people. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So what they did, and it's an absolutely revolutionary way of tidying up a chronology, or indeed tidying up any area of history, and I used it with Brutus, is to look at the characters of the people involved, forget the timeline for the time being, because that's what we're trying to establish.
Mhm.
If you look at the character of the people involved, you look at their characteristics, you look at their achievements, you look at the politics of what they were dealing with, battles and that sort of thing. And if there are correlations, and there are with the Egyptian dynasties, it's all in Wilson and Blackett's book, the Trojan War of 650 BC, which is an absolute must read. Then odds are you've got a one descent of people under 2, 3, 4, or sometimes even more names. And the mistake that the Egyptologists have done is to treat them all separately and try and stitch them together chronologically, down
Yes.
the way, instead of correlating them.
What a mess then.
Yeah, well, you can say that again.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
once you accept that the chronology, and there was a 600-year black hole, for example, and there's actually no 600-year black hole at all, because if you treat these dynasties properly, as Wilson and Blackett have done, the 600-year black hole disappears and everything falls neatly into place.
Right. Okay.
Now, this is revolutionary, and academia is not going to like it, but it will come to be accepted, because it's the only possible way of making sense of all these different people.
So can we place Queen Scota in the right period now? What period
We
would that
can
be?
place Scota at the time of the Second Trojan War, roughly 650 BC, and it's again, I'm not the expert on this, although I have done a little work on it. Egypt and now Nefertiti is supposed to have been Ashurbanipal's either daughter or sister, and there was whether the Egyptians were fighting with the Assyrians. Anyway, there was an alliance, and Scota is said to have fled at the time that this battle was going on. Again, it's all in Wilson and Blackett's 650 BC Trojan War book. So you'll have to forgive my lousy recall for this sort of thing. I can recall my own work sometimes. No, we're talking about 650 for Scota.
Right. Okay. Okay. So that was just before Brutus, wasn't it? In other words.
200 years, yes.
Yeah, not
yes,
far behind. Yeah.
only.
Okay. So let's go back to Albine then. So she arrived on our shores.
Yes.
So what happened next?
Well, it wasn't all that. It took her a long time to get. It was an overland migration, and this can be proved in various ways, various anthropological ways, which I go into in the book. She arrived and took the island over and established her headquarters here.
Okay.
And
am I right in saying that would be the first, not the first Troy, but Troy as such, and that would have been in Cambridgeshire? Am I
that's
getting that
right.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, either she built it, or it was already there. Maybe it was a pre-flood construction. Again, I don't know. I would say she probably rebuilt it after the flood, and there it stayed until this, what Iman Wilkins calls this continental alliance of European kings decided to crush it. And crush it they did in about 1150 BC. That was the first Trojan War. And all sorts of astonishing little lumps of evidence and bits of proof. I mean, I really oughtn't even to call it evidence and proof at this distance in time. But what am I to think when so there you have Troy on the top of the Gog Magog hills, and you have a village at the foot of this amazing city, big city it was too. And in this little village, Great Shellfield, I think it's called, you have a road called Priam's Way for no reason at all.
Mhm.
Now, you don't go and commemorate a classical historical figure, a classical stroke historical figure, unless there was something very important about him to that particular area.
Mm.
And I did try and find out how. The road is not new, but the houses on it are about 50s, 60s, somewhere around there. So new enough by our standards.
Mm.
But of course, the road itself must have been far, far, far older,
Mm.
and just happened to have been built along, and many other little things like that. Again, all in the book. Abraham, the name of Abraham is all over these islands in one form or another. It even turns up in the Brute, which I showed you.
Yes.
And it's just the British had a habit of hiding their, I won't say hiding, concealing or even protecting their histories in layers and layers of storytelling, because it's much, much easier to remember something that you're told as a story rather than having, to be force fed with hard facts. If you can dress something up as a story, this is another reason why our history has been written off as fairy tale, myth, legend, whatever, is because it is dressed up like this. Because being an oral society as we were then, it's much, much easier to remember, especially if it's set to music, which of course it would have been. I don't know if you remember cramming for exams and things, but I used to tape record things I needed to know and then play it back to myself. And this is how you learn. So in the Brute, which I showed you before, there is a description of Abraham as Albine's daughter, which
Right.
is astonishing because that overturns the biblical thing. And again, it's much more complicated than I can explain here and now. It is all in the book.
Yes.
But
Funnily enough, you say this just before I read your book. I read this book.
oh gosh, that's back to front. Cummins' Moment, yes.
Great
The Great
Deception.
Deception,
Now,
yes.
this, I don't mind admitting that bamboozled my mind quite
Yes.
considerably.
Yeah, me
Now,
too.
I haven't read any of his previous books because they're very hard to get hold of, and they've, as you know, they're quite expensive as well.
Yes.
But I did find it fascinating, but I was slightly disappointed by the fact that he didn't seem to cite any of his sources. So we're almost expected to kind of take this, at face value or whatever.
Yeah, I know. I don't like that.
Yeah.
George Jowett does the same thing with the Lost Disciples. There's a massive and wealth of information in George Jowett's book, but he doesn't give you any of his sources, and sources are essential for people to check things and yes, draw their own conclusions. But
Okay.
Cummins' Moment I find very difficult to read because he has flashes of brilliance amid a great deal of opacity, if you follow me. And the flashes of brilliance have remained with me, but there's a lot there that is too diffuse to get your teeth into. Oh,
Well,
except for one thing, which is the identity of Edinburgh as Jerusalem. Now, if one could sit down one winter's afternoon with the topography of Edinburgh and the topography of Jerusalem, which is what he did, they do correlate.
wow.
And there is I remember talking to Ross about this, there is a school of thought that says when Constantine was trying to wield the Roman Empire, so-called, back into a vigorous fighting force again. What he did was to take the Holy Land names from Britain and transplant them wholesale to the Holy Land, what we think of as the Holy Land, the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And the same happened at Anatolian Troy. They took the names, it happened all over Greece as well. They took the names like the river Scamander, Mount Ida, and all the rest of it. And if they found a river, they called it the Scamander.
Mm.
And this is another reason why people think that our history is so much bunk, or in this case, the Iliad was so much bunk, was because the topography didn't match. But you see, what this amazing man, Eman Wilkins, did was to sit down with an atlas and find out where it did match.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the topography of the Iliad matches Britain and the North Sea, nothing to do with the Aegean. But there's, if you look, we have modern precedents for this as well. For example, if you say Christchurch to an Englishman, he'll think of Dorset.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say Christchurch to a New Zealander, he'll think of New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Same name, but we just took the name out there. I mean, look at Birmingham, Alabama. It's the same name, but they're two entirely different places.
Yes.
And it's hellish confusing for the historian 3,000 years later who's trying to disentangle all this stuff.
It's fascinating stuff. This is possibly the world's deepest rabbit hole. So
I think so
we
too.
should move on, otherwise we'll get too stuck in that. I should have asked you actually. I may have mentioned it in my intro, but I believe that you're the world's first archaeographer.
Oh yes, I've invented this little discipline, which I always wanted to be an archaeologist, but I don't like digging, and I don't like the cold, and I don't like ruining my nails. Archaeography is a way of I keep trying to find a definition of archaeography. It's armchair archaeology. It involves etymology, and it's a way of finding why there was a connection. It's a way of establishing connections between two seemingly unrelated words. And it, as you have seen, it stood me in extraordinary stead, this, because what etymologists do is to take a word and then they take it back to ground level. So you've got, they say that this root is fine, but it's got nothing to do with that word or this like sounding word. But actually, if you take it deeper still, you find there is the most astonishing connection. Can I think of an example? No, of course I can't. So yes, I will have to come up with a proper definition of archaeography. Yes.
It's fascinating stuff. Okay. Shall we go back to Albine again? So how did she end her days? Did she end her days in this country, or did she go back to Sumeria? Or
I would say she ended her days in this country.
Right.
I don't know how young she was when she left Sumeria. Her overland migration will have taken anything up to 40 years, so she wasn't a young woman when she got here. Okay. She was married. She must have had children. It's difficult to tell. Hollinshead thinks that Albine was a giant in the king list, and then after him comes Celtes, I think it is, which could mean anything. So yes, it's difficult to tell who her descendants were.
So so Albine and Albine are two different people?
No, same thing.
Same person.
Same person.
Albine, yeah, yes. Okay. And that's why this country was called Albion.
Yes, but there's another reason for it. An Alp is a peak, and this, if you think of the what we described Sumer as the foot, Britain as the head, and the north is always the head in classical religions. This is why they've called themselves the black-headed people, because north is always black, and it's the positive, and it's where everything comes from, which is another bulwark in our theory that everything starts with these islands and then comes back to it and then comes out again and goes back. This flow of people has been going for a long time. I don't know after how many catastrophes has the Earth been through. But this is something again that I'm trying to pin down a little more.
Well, we seem to have been through quite a few catastrophes over the last, I don't know, maybe 5,000 years.
Oh yeah, I will. The stories of the flood. If you watch my Noah videos, you'll know that the old stories of the flood, like the Utnapishtim stories, and who's the other fellow, Atrahasis, and all those, they give a different point of view than the biblical one, and it seems to coincide much better with the flood story in the Kolbrin. For example, it tells of the flood not as a how can I put it, a tidal wave, but an upsurge of muddy waters.
Okay.
And this, there's too much to study. Really, I can't go into anything.
That reminded me. Sorry to interrupt you.
As I'd like to. Sorry
to interrupt you, Marchell, but that reminded me of something I read. Something I read in another book. I might have it here. It is, yeah. About I think it's called the Sargasso Sea.
Oh yes, yes.
For many years, hundreds of years, if not longer, apparently. Sailors used to avoid sailing through it because basically they couldn't, because there was this kind of I don't know if silt is the right word, but like mud and seaweed, and it was impossible to get through. I'm only going back maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years, and of course the Sargasso Sea is very close, I believe, to the West Indies and Cuba, which
where
is
the eels go to.
Yeah, and which is possibly where Atlantis was, or part of it was.
But that's fascinating, because there's the story of Atlantis in Plato mentions that sailors could not sail towards it because of the mud.
Yes.
Now, I don't know anything about the mud flood, but there are too many mentions of mud in old texts.
We were talking
for there not to be something to it. There's got to be something to it.
We were talking about Tartaria just prior to recording, so yeah, that is very interesting. But as I understand it, the Tartarian mud flood, I believe, happened fairly recently compared with what we were just talking about.
Yes.
But I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm no expert.
The Atrahasis flood was 1900 BC, so only, according to the Ira book, I'm not sure if that's correct or not, it seems to fit in with the geological surveys and statistics. But that was also a heaving up of liquid earth, almost as though earth liquefied. And then when it settled again, it was only about 5 feet deep. Could that be why the ark was made flat bottomed? Wow,
that's an idea. That's a thought. Yeah, quite possibly. Who knows?
There's also a story in the Triads about how Hugh Gadarn harnessed a crocodile and drew it out of a lake. And this lake was in Wales, was also given to not tidal waves, not destructive rainfall, not waterfalls or anything like that, or whirlwinds or water spouts. But this lake was also given to exploding in muddy waters.
Okay.
So there are things about this planet that our ancestors have remarked upon and noted that we clever people don't know the first thing about yet.
I'm also it's just occurred to me the Santorini volcano.
Yes.
Volcanic eruption, which some people say is what we're possibly confusing Atlantis with, and talking about Crete and the Minoans, obviously. Some people say that that was really where the Atlantis idea has come from. I don't know what you think
Crete
about that.
and Santorini were Atlantean outposts,
Right.
myself.
Okay.
Rather as the name of Troy has gone round the whole world. I've got a map, an old map of Cornwall, for example, with 4 Troys on it alone. I think rather, as we were saying earlier about taking our names with us, I think that's what happened after the fall of Atlantis, which I like to think happened as a consequence of the Storegga slide in about 6,000, was it about 6,500 years ago, or 6,500 BC? I forget which. Anyway, the Storegga slide was another sea of mud, and that is, you can check that all the way down from Caithness to the Montrose Basin and all the way down the east coast of England.
Wow.
And that sank Doggerland, which I think was.
Oh, okay. And that was, did you say 5,000 BC?
It's either 6,500 years ago, or it happened 6,500 BC. The Storegga slide. It was off the coast of Norway.
Yeah. I wonder if anyone's ever done some sort of excavation. I know, obviously, Doggerland sank, but if anyone has actually been down there and is.
Oh, yes. No, this
evidence.
is absolutely fascinating, because there was a team that went, a joint team, I think it was Trinity College Dublin, Robert Gordon, Aberdeen, and 1 or 2 other places. And they got a team of divers together, and they went down over Doggerland, and they did surveys, and they sent divers down, because you probably know the North Sea is pretty shallow. And they found evidence for a city down there that was capable of harboring 10,000 people. Wow. And they found streets, and it's I've got all the information about it. It might have been removed from the internet by now, I don't know, but I've got it all on record.
Fascinating. I've not heard of that at all, so I'll be looking into
No, well, it wasn't publicised. It went.
Right.
The BBC did a little thing of it, and then 3 days later it had gone. You can still find it, or at least you could the last time I looked. But yes, people have done this massive combined survey and found this huge city down there.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, what a wonderful digression that was.
Oh, sorry, this is a digression.
No, we were just, to-ing and fro-ing, and before you know it, we've covered Atlantis and God knows what else. But
yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to your book.
Santorini, yes. But if you want me to return to Albine for a second, Santorini happens to have blown up at exactly the right time for her migration. And you'll know that a really massive volcanic eruption gives warning of itself, sometimes for years in advance. You'll get earthquakes, you'll get all sorts of other turbulence, and, so they had time to prepare. But the tsunami, the tidal wave from that explosion must have gone around the entire world. And I do wonder whether the tide of mud that Leonard Woolley found at doesn't date from that Santorini explosion, and it's in exactly the right time for her.
Okay, fascinating. Right, okay. I've just noticed the time, and we're already 3/4 of an hour into the video. We haven't got onto Brutus yet. I really wanted to talk to you about London as well, and the founding.
Oh, yes.
And I had a feeling that this might turn into an 8-hour video. So, and
well, I'll have to go and do something about Grub fairly soon. But
yes, me too.
Yeah, London. Well, it's quite simple, really. After Troy was crushed, Troy on Cambridgeshire was crushed in about 1150 BC. They simply moved south to the left bank of the Thames, where the Walbrook meets the Thames, and they founded New London in about 1130 BC. This is in the records, the British records. And it makes perfect sense. 20 years to recover from such a crushing blow. Your entire capital city has been wiped out. It's going to take you 20 years to recover, to regroup, and go and find somewhere else to build a new capital. Again, in the book, I've managed to find all sorts of evidence that London is much, much older than people think it is. The name alone, Londin, the Romans called it Londinium Augusta, and that was a very special honorific that they kept for cities like Trier and Paris and Rome itself. They didn't call just any old collection of mud huts Londinium Augusta, I can promise you.
So what's the official dating for London, and how far back do you go with London?
The official dating, oh no, it's ridiculous. They say it was begun about 5 years after Claudius got here, so we're talking AD 50. 10 years after that, 10 years only after that, it was important enough for Boudica to burn it to the ground. Now, that's nonsense. It can't possibly be the case. I haven't quite. Boudica's a bit late for me, so I haven't really got to the bottom of that. But the founding date in the British histories of 1130 correlates very well with. Again, I can't say the archaeology. Because people are misdating the archaeology, they're misattributing it. The Roman road near Telford?
Yes, you mentioned that.
Yes, which of course isn't Roman at all. I only mention that because it's a very good example of how absolutely manic the academics are about everything being Roman. They automatically call it Roman, even when it can't possibly chronologically be Roman.
I've been learning about this because I've been watching Adam Griffith and his friend Peter. I can't remember.
Oh yeah, yes.
But they often talk about this, about the fact that everything that's discovered is Roman. It's always Roman.
Yes, usually when it isn't.
Yes.
And they find a villa, let us say, and they call it a Roman villa. Well, no, I mean the British and the Romans are cousins. They're both Trojans. They go back hundreds of centuries, or certainly tens of centuries. And just because a British nobleman decides to build himself, and let's call it an Italianate villa, it doesn't make either him or the villa Roman. It just, if you think of a grand country house, Hopetoun in near Edinburgh, it's built in the Italianate style, but it's not Italian. And they once they, if ever they get past this this Roman, and for the Welsh it's even worse because all their castles are called Norman, even though the Normans never really penetrated Wales.
Well, Wales, neither did the Vikings, either did they? Because Wales is so far to penetrate; it's almost impossible because of the landscape, primarily. I think, yeah. So
yes, yeah. We won't say lucky in this country. We're easier to conquer in England, I think.
Yes. Oh well, never mind. Let's move on because I don't want to hog you for too long. So, before we move on to Brutus, you mentioned, I know you haven't researched Boudica very much, but I believe that you intimated in your book that Boudica was possibly related to Albine. Is that correct, or did I make that up?
Well, she was the queen of the Iceni.
Yes.
Whether she was queen in her own right and Prasutagus was her consort, or the other way round, I don't know. But Albine had a very strong presence, but mainly because of Troy, I suppose, in the Fenland, Cambridgeshire, all around there, which is Iceni land. So odds are that either Boudica and Prasutagus, her husband, king, would both have been descended, yes.
Wow. Okay.
So that's where are we talking? So that's 2,000 years. Albine will have had a lot of descendants all over the country by then.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, it's time for Brutus, I think. So, where do we start with the Brutus story, Marcia?
Well, it's again actually much simpler than Albine because there's more to get your teeth into. Very simply, at the same time that Brutus, the Roman consul, disappears from the Roman records, there was a civil war raging in Britain, and the senior line had well, it hadn't died out because there were twin sons who were fighting for the throne. But Brutus was the lineal descendant of King Lear, who, yes, did actually exist. Holinshed's chronicles are called chronicles for a reason, because they are a history, not because they're a bunch of fantasies all stuck together. And he was the lineal descendant from Lear's daughter, Regan.
Mm-hmm.
The older line from what do we call her? Goneril. Her Welsh name is Coronil. So there's a spot of metathesis at work there. The consonants have simply changed place. But Brutus is descended from Regan, and he's co-consul in the new Roman Republic for 1 year. And I think he finds it too limiting. So for whatever reason, he engineers his escape from Rome, and he sets off round the Aegean, and he fetches up in Epidaurus, and he gathers bands of Trojans to himself. And he's gathering an army because he wants to come back to Britain, which is much greater meat, I think. There's a strong element of wanting to go home in all this. Again, it's in the book, but so he's actually summoned from the east. This is all. I worked all this out from his nom de guerre, which is how do you say it? Dyfnwal Moelmud, who everybody thinks is this wonderful sovereign paramount who suddenly storms into British history and quells a civil war. Well, that wasn't a separate man at all. That was Brutus under another name. And just as we call Richard I the Lionheart, Brutus was also Dyfnwal Moelmud, and it actually means, behold the tonsured one summoned from the east.
Oh,
Which
wow.
he was, and he was summoned to quell this civil
Mm.
war, which he did to great effect, and became sovereign paramount. He was about 65-ish, 60, mid-60 when he came to this country with his second wife and a new family. And he was 25 years on the throne. He unified the entire country and left it in what you might call tripartite. So the three kingdoms, Lloegr, which is what the Welsh still call England, Cymru, Wales, which used to stretch over the whole of the north of England as well, and Albine were the three parts, like the three fingers of the Arwen, or the three prongs of the trident, which is the Arwen in reverse. He left it to his eldest son, Locrine. And Brennus, who you mentioned, was actually Locrine's son.
Oh, so he was Brutus's nephew?
Brutus's grandson.
Grandson, sorry.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
To re-record the intro.
No, well, no.
Never mind. I should have sworn it was his brother. No, I don't know where I got that.
But so yes, he was summoned here from the east to quell a civil war.
Yes,
basically.
and now he was. I think I'm getting this right. He was told by the goddess Diana to come to Britain. Am I right about that? Was it Diana? Or was it?
Well, yes, the romantic English or British historians will tell you that, but there's a very different story given in the Colbrin.
Right.
And Brutus was a very, very slippery, very slippery character. He had a lot of integrity, but my goodness me, he was a cunning politic man. And he knew that the only way he could get his elders and his statesmen to agree to come to this funny little foggy island of ours was if they had divine sanction to do so. So the Colbrin has this wonderful description of how he gets an armourer's daughter to hide behind the plinth in this temple and pretend to be the voice of Diana. So yeah, maybe he did have a dream. Maybe Diana did speak to him, and maybe it was all got up because he wanted to come to Britain.
So
he
I must
knew there was a throne waiting for him, but
right.
the
So I
only
must.
way
Sorry, go on, carry on.
no, I only could say the only way he could get his council, if you like, to agree was if they had divine sanction to do it.
Yeah, sure.
So I think he cooked it up myself, but
Well,
that's
yeah.
my Scots hard head. I don't know. I don't want to be iconoclastic about it.
I must have got things confused in my mind, because I remember in the book, the goddess was telling Brutus to go to this, this country in the far west, northwest, whatever, and that the country was largely empty. And,
Yes,
and I was thinking at the same time, hold on a minute, there's a civil war going on.
Yeah, exactly. The problem with when you've got an island story as ancient as ours, with many goings and comings, is that they tend to get conflated. So you'll get lumps of one story mixed in at the wrong time with another story.
And I've not even asked you about the Ark of the Covenant yet, which is that's crazy. So I really wanted to get into that, and it's
it all fits.
yes.
It all fits with being in. I keep wanting to say Etruscany. I can't call it that. Etruria, Etruscan Italy, at the same time as Brutus, because it will have been brought by the Anatolian remnant 100 odd years before. And
do you believe that it ended up in Wales like animals?
Yes, I do. Yeah, absolutely, I do. Yes.
Is it still there now? Surely somebody's dug it up by now then.
No, the farmers are very protective of it. Let's put it like that.
Wow, that's amazing. Did you buy into the cross where Jesus's cross is supposed to be? It begins with an N in Wales somewhere.
Nevern, yes.
Nevern.
No.
Saint Helena?
St Helena, yes,
Helena,
Constantine's mother, yes. I do indeed. It's a very holy, numinous place. Now, this isn't proof, but I read that a psychic had been taken to Nevern, George somebody he was called, and he was asked what he could see behind this quite obviously contrived rock face. And you can see that it's a cave entrance that's been filled in. And he said, I see a pyramid and I see a man, a holy man, whose body has, over the centuries, has bent forward, bent double.
The man's body.
I don't know who that was, he says, but I'm feeling suffocated.
Wow.
And that's suffocation, as you know, is a hallmark of death by crucifixion. And he was a very holy man.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
I'll have to go there then.
It isn't proof, but on the other hand, anybody who dismisses that sort of thing and doesn't at the very least keep an open mind about it, it runs the risk of losing a lot. Closed minds are so dangerous.
I'm in a rather invidious position with that, because I've been a faithful servant to the Edessan theory with regards to Jesus, which are the series of books that Ralph Ellis wrote on the historical Jesus, and they're so well, much like your own book, they're so well researched and well written, and a lot of the ideas he puts forward in those books are extremely plausible, and he makes complete sense of Josephus and all these kind of, I mean, there was like all these different Jesuses hanging out basically in Jerusalem. There was Jesus of Gamala, Jesus of Caiaphas, I think it is. There's others, and I think the basic idea is that on behalf of the Romans, Josephus kind of fragmented the Jesus character and put him into different characters. If you broke him up, do you see what I'm saying? So
I do indeed, yes. Oh,
yeah,
well, yes, it's like, yes, I see exactly what you're saying. I haven't read Ellis's books yet.
highly recommend them.
Well, thank you. I have borne that in mind.
I've interviewed him about 30 times on YouTube, so
Wow.
take your pick. Take your
Um,
pick. Yeah.
The difficulty when you're writing what you might call a brand new history book, is how far to take other people's research. And I took the minimum possible from other people, simply so that as I say, so that I had a chronological skeleton to hang my discoveries on. And in the end, what I found was that people were not necessarily telling lies. But what they did do was get the chronologies frightfully mixed up. But not having the sort of brain that can cope with a great many ideas at once, I thought, no, I've got to steer clear, and I've just got to stick to the historians that I've got and that sort of thing. So no, I haven't read his books yet, and I haven't read Fomenko either, for the same reason, because I would find it rather mind-blowing, I think.
Mhm.
Time will tell. Look, there's a terrific, sorry if I'm going to get a bit esoteric now, but there's a tremendous.
You're on the right channel for that. Carry on.
I'm glad. Well, I'm glad, because I hope your viewers will sense this as well. But there is we are coming together. There are two sides of the great mind which are coming together, coming back into focus. And when this focus is achieved, and there's no more room for the parasites, let's put it like that, to leech off our energies and try and steal our history and all the rest of it. Once that's watertight, we will remember who we are, and we will remember who we were. It'll all tie in with reincarnation, past life memories, that sort of thing. It's all a bit kaleidoscopic at the moment, but it will come together, and then nobody will be able to pull the wool over our eyes about who we were, and we will find out what's true and what isn't.
That's riveting. So yeah. So
I hope that doesn't sound too. I've lived with this all my life. This sort of awareness, and it's only increased since I wrote this book.
okay.
So we're coming into focus, basically.
Marchell, where can I'm going to end it here, I think, because that's a wonderful place to end it on. There are so many things that I haven't asked you about today, so I do feel that I have to ask you back on at some point.
I'd love to.
Oh, thank
I'd
you.
love to. I'm sorry if I've been fully minded and diffuse about all this, but I can only remember what I can remember, and I do have a wretched memory.
You're doing pretty well as far as I'm concerned. So we haven't touched upon Sardinia. We haven't touched upon the Ark of the Covenant much. We haven't touched upon many other things in your book. So most importantly, where can people buy this?
Oh, well, please come to my website, which is williamcongreve.co.uk. It's in the book.
Yeah.
It's actually on the front. Yeah, it's in this thingy here that gives the legal page. My website is there, and you can buy it from me, or you can buy it through Hieroglyphics, Ross's publishing company, or you can buy it from Watkins Books if you happen to be in London.
Fantastic. No mention of Amazon. Well done.
No, I refuse to sell through Amazon, and I don't do Gardner's book distribution either, which is silly, really, for a brand new publisher. But they demand 60% discount, and I can't afford that.
That's crazy.
So if there's any bookshop out
Endless.
there who wants my books, give me a call, and I'll send you a box of them.
Okay. Please, if you're watching this, please check out Marchell's YouTube channel, and especially look out for the 2-part documentary on Noah. Are you planning on doing any more documentaries or videos,
I'd
Marchell?
love to get back to it. Yes, we've had quite a challenging couple of years with moving house and rather patchy health and various other challenges. But I just thought, can I mention this? This is a novel, my novel Nighthawk, which has just come out.
Oh, right.
This is also available through my my website. This has actually got the Brutus story as its backdrop. It's a contemporary romantic thriller, but it's got the Brutus story as its backdrop. And in fact, this came out a couple of years ago. This has got the Iliad as its backdrop. Right. And most of my novels have one or other aspect of forgotten British history behind, as you know, as their backdrop.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I should have mentioned actually that you're how would I put this? A romantic historical novelist,
romantic thriller writer. Yes.
Yes.
I'm hugely inspired by Mary Stuart when I was very young. She was not only a cracking good writer, but she was also at Durham. She was very literary. She wore her learning very lightly, and she wrote some really, really good romantic thrillers with very good car chases and that sort of thing.
Ooh,
and I thought when she died, that's absolutely the end of my life. What am I going to do with no more Mary Stuarts? And then I thought I better write some of my own. So I've got about 10 of them now, and they're going to be coming out bit by bit.
And you're also working on more than one book at the moment as well,
yes,
aren't you?
I am. Yes. Yeah, most of my novels are written. It just the serious books have yet to be wrenched into shape.
So will there be a follow-up to The Great Migrations?
Yes, Finding the Phoenix. But
Yes.
there's another one which called God's Body, which is basically it says in the Bible that God made us in his image. That must mean that God, on a cosmic level, has eyes, nose, mouth, ears, liver, lungs, and all the rest of it. So I set to work to find out what the words mean and why, for example, is the liver called the liver. And you can imagine the rabbit holes it's a warren down there. So that's God's Body. And God's Body has elbowed Finding the Phoenix out of the way and is being written as we speak. So I don't know what's going to come out next. You'll have to forgive me for not being more precise about this, but
that's okay. I suddenly need to buy another 4 or 5 new books, quite clearly. It sounds
and one's reading pile is beginning to totter.
Sorry, I have to just put that on the screen as well.
Well, that's a bit like me waiting for it as well, actually.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely fascinating. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed reading this.
Thank you.
I said I read it in about 3 days. I couldn't put it down. And then I couldn't stop talking about it to people for days on end. So it's just, it's a wonderful book. I never imagined that. I mean, you know, as far as I knew, our history started with the Romans. There was very little going on beyond that. And all of a sudden, I feel like I've been handed 1,500 years worth of history.
Oh, how lovely of you to put it like that. Thank you.
That's what it is, and it's just incredible.
I feel so privileged to have been shown all this, and it's all from the words. I don't have a history. I do have a history O level, but it was a failed A level. So I didn't go to university or anything like that. So I owe it all to the words. It was the words themselves that showed me all this And as I always say, I just go where the words take me, and I do the research when I get there.
Wonderful.
So there are huge gaps that need to be filled in.
Yes, there's still much work that needs to be done.
Lots of work to be done. We
This
need
is a
to
great place to start.
reattribute London's archaeology. We really, really need, and somebody's asked me to do this, which is daunting, but rather exciting. So that means condensing the reigns of the kings and trying to find, for example, Lear, who was buried on the River Soar in Leicester with his daughter Cordelia. We need an archaeologist with an open mind in Leicester who knows where there is an urn or a Bronze Age tomb, an Iron Age tomb of a man and a younger woman, because if we can find an Iron Age tomb on the River Soar in Leicester, Old Leicester, obviously, then we found the grave of Lear and his daughter Cordelia.
Wow, that would
and
be.
we need to correlate what we already know without prejudice, because there's such a lot of CRAP talked about our history. We need to look at the facts, never mind people's interpretation. If only people would stop interpreting and just...
She's gone. What a shame. That's happened throughout the video today. So I'm actually going to end it here. So please like, share and subscribe. Do yourself a favour. If you like ancient history, if you've ever wondered about our own ancient history in Britain, this is the best possible place to start. Okay, so go to William Congrove, I think it is, publishers, or the other publishers that Marchell mentioned. Get yourself a copy. You will not be disappointed. And I very much hope to have Marchell back on the channel in the not too distant future. So
what we really need is people to look at what we've already found and correlate it with the revised British histories, because only that way will we be able to stitch the recorded fact back to the archaeological fact. And that way the facts will speak for themselves. This needs to start happening pronto, once we've got rid of our dear Mr. Stalin, of course.
Good old two-tier Kia. Whoops, that's got me.
Oh, did you say that?
Okay, we best end it there.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Marchell, for joining me today. I hope you can join me in the not too distant future to discuss
I'd love to.
Many of the things that we haven't got onto. There's so much in this book, everyone. You've got to read it. Okay, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you for another video.
Thank you very much for asking me. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.